I went to a workers' meeting today, and there is one woman in there that made a comment. And when she made that comment, I said, you know what? She has to appear on Politics Done Right because she has some very important, very prescient information for all candidates, but specifically for women candidates. I'm with Robin Wilt of Woke PAC. Robin, it is a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you so much for having me, Director.
Absolutely, but please, first of all, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so I am from Rochester, New York. I grew up there. I am the first generation daughter of immigrants from Guyana.
Okay.
And I have 4 siblings. I currently serve on the town board of Brighton, New York.
Right.
That's outside of Rochester. And I did run for elected office last year, again, a higher office. I ran for Congressional District 25 in New York.
Right.
And in the wake of that is when I established the Woke PAC, which is the Women of Color Electoral PAC.
Right.
And what we do is we're an economic justice system within this broader picture of funding electoral campaigns, because a lot of candidates for office, especially currently, are not equipped with the same tools as the establishment candidates, and they're challenging a lot of cases. In particular, underrepresented communities of color, do not have access to the same resources, do not have access to the same electoral knowledge or base of voters, and so this is an attempt to level that playing field.
Right. Now, you mentioned earlier that there is a prototypical candidate that people think there is, but in reality it is a myth. Why don't you expand on that? Because what happens is I think a lot of women are not getting into the fold. A lot of people that think they don't have the resources are not getting into the fold, and that leaves us with a politics that is quite
it's not representative.
Exactly.
It's not representative.
Right.
And that was one of my arguments for being on the town board in the first place. You know, on our town board, and this is in a progressive town that, you know, highly touts its progressive values.
Right.
And they say that they value education, they value diversity, they value sustainability, yet we had 5 white males serving on the town board. And so when there was an opening on the board, that's when I made my case for office.
Right.
And I think we are often not reflected in the leadership. And so we don't have, you know, people don't consider it an option. They don't see themselves reflected, and so they don't pursue elective office.
Right.
When really our perspectives are very valuable. And we saw that in the case of Ayanna Pressley, in fact.
Right, absolutely so.
And she said those who are closest to the pain need to be closest to the power.
Right.
And what she meant by that is that, you know, stakeholders in the community, those who are dealing most directly with the issues, dealing most directly with the impact of our policy, need to be the ones at the table. Right.
You know, it's interesting because I was at a Daily Coast meeting just after the panel that we were on, and I spoke. Maurice Mitchell of the Working's Family Party was there, and that is what he tried to illustrate. Right now, we watch TV and we see the people discussing politics at this high level. The people the people that are furthest away from the problems, discussing how to solve the problems. And I think what you're trying to articulate here is the people closest to the problems are the ones who should be the representatives.
Absolutely. They are the ones who should be at the table of power crafting those policies.
Right.
And we don't see enough of it. Obviously, in Congress, we're only about between 9 and 10% women of color.
Right.
And, you know, we've seen the result of that in our communities. That's why we see these disparities in our communities, because policy is not crafted with our priorities in mind. And so the Woke PAC is essentially about electoral empowerment.
Right.
for underrepresented.
Before I ask you to tell a little bit more about Woke PAC specifically and tell people how to engage with it, there's this thing called the electability factor. Why don't you bust that myth for me with some new research that has emerged?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that when women do run, I think the biggest problem is recruiting women to run because it is an inhumane process seeking office, and a lot of us play many different roles. We're community activists, we're mothers, we're daughters. We play a lot of roles within our families and our communities, and it requires sacrifice to run for office. And so I think that's one of the reasons we don't see women seeking elected office. But we know that when women do run, when they overcome that obstacle and do put their hat in the ring, they win at the same levels as men.
And there is the data out to say that now.
Yes,
in other words,
absolutely.
if women run, women win at the same rate as anybody else.
Yes.
So there's no reason.
Yes, there's no reason to suggest. And I am actually in a predominantly white community.
Right.
My community is 86% black. So, it's not to say that we should only be running in communities where we are the overwhelming majority.
Right.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg famously said, when people said, well, how many women on the Supreme Court will it take for you to be happy?
Right.
And she said, when there are 9. Because for decades there were 9 men and nobody said anything.
And nobody said, it's amazing, isn't it?
Right.
It's like missing the norm. Okay, so Robin, tell us a little bit about Woke PAC and what you're going to do for the listeners here who decide that they've seen you, you've inspired them, and now they want to run.
Okay, so in underrepresented communities, I think the running for office can be really daunting because we're not necessarily engaged in the process. We don't necessarily have a foot in the door already. I know in my Democratic committee, it is predominantly white, overwhelmingly so. I'm one of few black faces there, and so learning that process, it can in and of itself be daunting. So we provide infrastructure, we provide knowledge, institutional knowledge, and we provide the resources, monetary resources, in order to seek office. Because I think when you're recruited to run for office, one of the first things that whoever recruited you would tell you is that you need money. Come back when you've raised X amount of money.
Right.
And so this is a resource for people to get that early nest egg. And just like in the case of Emily's list, early money is like yeast. We try to provide those resources to women of color who are seeking office and challenge in that regard.
Robin, again, tell people how they can connect with you directly.
You can connect with me on wokepac.com. That's WOKE, women of color with a K, electoralpac.com. So wokepac.com, and you can find us there.
Robin, Wilt, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, and you
well.
get the job done.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you so much.